Registered to join us this afternoon, and a lot of you have joined us multiple times, so you're probably familiar with the Q&A function by now, but please do put your questions there as the briefing goes along. With that, I will turn it over to President Lemons, who is muted.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this President's Live briefing. And joining us today again are Provost Nwosu and Vice President Rotolo. Thank you both for being here. I'd like to begin by remembering Representative John Lewis, that gentle giant, powerful person who we have lost. Today's New York Times published Representative Lewis's final word to all of us. I hope you'll read it, but I'm going to read you some parts of that. He titled his op-ed, "Together You Can Redeem the Soul of Our Nation." And the subtitle is, Though I'm gone, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. He began his op-ed piece by saying, "While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. Millions of people, motivated simply by human compassion, laid down the burdens of division. Around the country and the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity." He goes on to describe how Emmett Till was his George Floyd and briefly tell about how he became a part of the historic civil rights movement and his association with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Says you learn from Dr. King that when you see something that's not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state, it's an act. And each generation must do its part to help build what he called the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. And then he goes on to say, ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. We've heard that phrase many times from Representative Lewis, and I'm sure that you, like I, have found this sobering as well as a moment of celebrating this amazing person. So for Lehman College, let me come down to begin with a few words of good news again. One, 15 of our students applied for Gilman scholarships this year to study abroad for the coming year. 9 of them won, which is really, truly remarkable. So that will most likely mean that once again, we will be a top producing Gilman institution for the 3rd year in a row. Congratulations to Dr. Matthew O'Dowd of the Department of Physics and Astronomy, who has been awarded a grant from Schmidt Futures in the amount of $2.9 million over the course of the next 5 years. The title of the project is Gravitational Lensing and Machine Learning in the Next Generation of Sky Surveys. So hopefully we're all going to get to benefit from those studies and learn more about what Professor Dowd will be working on. In July, I announced in the briefing that despite the desperately constricted New York City budget, through the extraordinary work of our city council member, Andrew Cohen, we'd been awarded $525,000 in capital funds to complete the renovation of the social work department space, and another $1.05 million for the teaching and learning commons that will serve as a center for innovation and research and pedagogy for staff, faculty, and students. Now, in addition to that, we've received confirmation, thanks to the efforts of Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., will also receive an additional $5,000 for the Department of Social Work, which allows us to complete that project with the previously allocated New York City funds in previous funding years. These multi-million-dollar projects are now proceeding. So despite the extremely tight budgets and as you know, major reductions in New York City's overall budget, we still have been allocated these funds. For the last 2 days, I have spent most of my time doing something which is an annual ritual within CUNY at every college. Every college president right now is preparing a report for the chancellor in what is called the PMP, the Performance Management Process. That is a system that's been in place for probably getting close to 15 years now, in which college presidents report to the chancellor on their performance over the previous academic year and how well the college did on the goals that it set out to accomplish in that year. I'm happy to report that in many of the CUNY success indicators, Lehman College is #1. So I have to say this has been a really fun 2 days for me. Hard work maybe, but really gratifying to see what has been accomplished at Lehman College. We'll prepare a report in the next month for the campus that will be based on this report that I'm going to submit to the chancellor. You'll want to read it because I think you too will be truly impressed by what has happened at the college in this past year. It isn't possible to not have a great sense of pride in Lehman College and what's been accomplished. And there's no question that that is really through the dedication and talent and hard work of the administrative team, the staff, the faculty, and students. So the credit really goes to all of you and to your colleagues. Next, I want to just say a little bit about the budget. We're still waiting action in Washington, D.C., and we will not have a revised New York State budget until that is settled, at least until then, and it may be sometime after that. Because of that, we have been in a waiting mode, and one of the things that has been held up is the distribution of the CARES Act allocations to the colleges. And this has put us on a temporary footing. It already did for the month of July, which is ending tomorrow, and it will now again for the month of August. And we think the likelihood that we will actually have a revised budget even in August is very low. So we will probably be on temporary footing with our budget for some time. One thing that is clear and that I really regret about this is that it has inconvenienced so many of the staff of the college, and it has been a huge extra burden for many offices in the college as paperwork has become repetitive from month to month. Paperwork and that should have been able to be completed once for the year is having to be repeated. Obviously, these are circumstances that are well beyond our control. Nonetheless, the impact of this is really clear, and I'm very sorry about that because I know that is real work, and it's added to what already is really a demanding time of the year. We think we've prepared ourselves the best that we can for these adjustments as they come along, but as I've said before, uncertainty is our new certainty, and that remains the case. So with that, I would like to ask Vice President Rotolo to update us on what has been happening mainly around presence on campus of staff and faculty, and what will be coming up in the next month or two.
Thank you,
Vice President
President
Rotolo.
Rene. Thank you, President Lemons. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you again today to give you a brief overview of the Phase 1 plans for returning to campus. The Phase 1 Return to Campus plan is focused on preparing the campus for occupancy by increased essential personnel, which includes maintenance, operation, and IT personnel, who will be physically present to perform their jobs, as well as researchers and administrative staff who must also be physically present to both conduct research and to complete work. The working group includes representatives from these Phase 1 areas. The working group's role was to identify the concerns and potential problems associated with opening the campus and to recommend solutions to guide the plans for a safe return to campus. Next slide, please. The working group's guiding principle was focusing on the safety of the college community. We recommended a multi-phased return, protecting all members of the community while slowly and thoughtfully repopulating the campus, minimizing presence on campus where possible without loss of functionality. Once we begin the return, at each step, new groups may be cleared to return. Progression to the next step will be contingent on the successful completion of the previous. Next slide, please. The Phase 1 report includes a long list of 7.5 pages of requirements and guidelines that must be in place prior to a full return. I've included a few here just to give an example. Some of the requirements and guidelines include policies and procedures, which talks about the guidelines that HR will be implementing for accommodations and what we have been already implementing for daily screenings and testing training protocols. There's facility protocols, which includes cleaning and disinfecting and the frequency of it, and modifications or cleanings we've done to the HVAC systems. The supplies we'll need, which includes all of the PPE for everyone on campus, disinfecting, disposable keyboard covers for computers in areas where students may occupy, communication plans, similar to town halls, be constantly communicating with the community to give them updates and let them know what's going on. Signage about hand washing, wearing masks on campus, cough and sneeze etiquette, training, safe workspace training, training on how to properly wear a mask, training on when to wear gloves, training on properly disposing of your PPE, and then how we'll be accessing the campus, the pre-screening that's required, and that we will be requiring everyone to schedule access. It will not be an open campus for the next while. Contact tracing, the protocols for reporting and follow-up, and guidelines for specific spaces, for uses and functions. Next slide, please. The plan itself is broken into 4 phases of return in Phase 1. The first, 1A, happened a few weeks back. We increased B&G staffing on campus to install signage around campus, to implement the requirements and prepare the campus and buildings for people to return. Phase 1B is the return of research, which New York State approved in New York City Phase 2. CUNY's approved Lehman's plan, and research returned on campus on Monday, July 20th. That was last Monday, not this past, but the prior Monday. And they're following a phased approach, slowly increasing people and researchers in the labs. Phase 1C will occur after our campus plan is approved by CUNY. We expect to submit our plan next week. Phase 1C will include staff of those administrative or student service functions that are not functioning well off campus. You may all remember the survey we had sent out. We had 94 responses to that survey. And the majority of staff and departments said they were functioning well remotely. Approval to reopen will allow staff, in consultation with their supervisor, to arrange to be on campus to work when needed. We anticipate, though, that most visits to campus will continue to be to pick up supplies, get mail, process payments, and complete work that can only be done on campus. It's very similar to what has been happening over the last few weeks or few months. The last phase, Phase 1D, is a partial return of some student services and preparing for a Phase 2 return of hybrid classes that will be partially held on campus. Next slide, please. The final draft plan is going through a review process now. Once the final plan, not a draft, but the actual final plan is ready for submission, it will be posted on the college's website when we submit it to CUNY for their review and approval. And once we have approval from CUNY, we can then move into the phase 1C of allowing more people on campus. And now I'll turn it over to the Provost to update you on phase 2 and give you more information.
Thank you very much, Vice President Rotolo, and thank you, President Lehman. I do want to speak very briefly about phase 2 of the reopening plan. And suddenly that phase 2 of the reopening plan is focused more on academic continuity and student support. And that work we have been engaged on campus has involved Vice President Rotolo as a member of the phase 2 reopening task force. We do also have other members of that task force, Dr. Mary Phillips, who is assistant professor in the Department of Africana Studies. We have Dr. Teresita Livy, who is the department chair, as well as the executive director of the Office of International Programs and Community Engagement. We have Vice President Rene Sarmiento, Enrollment Management. We have the Dean of Students, Dr. Stanley Basil, who is also executive in charge of student affairs. We have the Associate Provost, Dr. Brown, as a member, the Senior Registrar, Yvette Rosario, and then the Director of Online Education, Olena Zatko. These are members of the task force, and this group will be meeting again next week to review the draft plan that's been prepared before submission to the central office. As I mentioned at the last briefing, next slide, we did ask our deans and our department chairs to submit reopening plans for each of their schools. And I want to really thank them for the time they took working very closely with department chairs and appropriate faculty to develop the reopening plan. What I'm sharing with you is simply what you see on the screen is a summary of that work. A grand total of more than 3,000 courses planned for fall 2020. And this actually speaks to the next one speaks to the modality of instruction. Because of the challenge we continue, stay where you are. Because of the challenge we've had and we continue to have with the pandemic, at this point in time, and this is again what we will be submitting to CUNY Central, we have zero, and I want to be very careful about this, what traditional in-person classes on campus, the way we typically have traditional in-person classes on campus is not what you will be expecting in fall 2020. But we do have modified in-person sections, and that modification is really a result of discussions that the deans have had with Vice President Rotolo and the senior registrar in terms of what works with our facility, what's the most safe arrangement that can be made to ensure we have the appropriate social distancing in the classrooms, and that in fact, that when those students and faculty and staff that are able to come on campus as a consequence of the plan, that we are doing this in the safest way possible. 8% of these courses I mentioned are also hybrid classes, and is a combination of either online, for the most part online, and some presence on campus either to have an exam or as the case may be for any other reason. There's a small number of labs and tutorials that we have, and those will be coming to campus periodically in terms of the arrangement we have made with our deans and chairs. And there's field work and clinical placements that will be taking place off campus. And most of these clinical placements and field work are from the School of Education and our School of Health Sciences, Human Services, and Nursing. Next slide. As you recall, when we went into the virtual modality mode in spring, we really didn't have enough preparation vis-a-vis all of our faculty as well as all of our students. We quickly went into that mode. Very few days required to prepare. And over time, however, we have built up our professional development capacity through the work done by our online office, as well as work done by our IT office through Steve Castellano, online, of course, through Olena Zadko. Through that process, we were able to enhance professional development opportunities for faculty through the rest of the semester in spring. And we also continued that work over the course of summer. We plan to continue that professional development opportunities for faculty in preparation for fall. And what I have here is simply a plan that outlines the work that's already begun in July this month, as far back as July 8th, to provide opportunities for both full-time and adjunct faculty at the institution. The first part of this workshop is what we call Essentials to Teaching Online, and it does have a number of components to that bigger picture Essential Teaching Online workshop. This is really a workshop, a comprehensive workshop that prepares faculty on how to teach online, in addition to the resources they might in fact need to be able to do an effective job. A key part of this comprehensive series of professional development opportunity is the just-in-time online training. A number of you probably that are listening may have had exposure already to this 75-minute course. We plan to continue to offer this particular workshop. There is also within this particular Essentials to Teaching Online, the other experiences, the FAQs we've put in place for teaching online in a hurry, recorded teaching and learning webinars that we have as well, and a Blackboard basics training that's provided through our IT office. The dates for these workshops you have listed here. And then we also asking our adjunct faculty to, for those who have appointments for fall, to register. And once they're registered, they're also eligible for 2 hours of payment at their NTA rate. And so we have those dates listed all through August 27th. And we're encouraging them to register for this particular 75-minute workshop, the just-in-time online training workshop, and others that you see there. There is also, next slide, another much more extended workshop as well. It's a foundational workshop for teaching online. We have been offering this, and we will continue to offer this throughout the rest of the academic year, not just for fall, but the entire academic year. And it's a 2-week workshop. It's provided through CUNY. What we are asking of faculty members, both full-time and adjunct, is that they have to have the chair's approval in order to register for this particular workshop. It's a much more extended workshop, and there are a number of requirements or expectations that we have of them once they complete the workshop successfully. For the full-time faculty and of course the part-time, there would also be some payment based on 10 hours at their NTA rate as well. The dates for these workshops are provided, and the link also provided. You can also find this on the webpage for the Office of Online Education. Recall that we funded a number of faculty members to serve as faculty mentors. There were resources for each of our 4 academic schools. We continued that mentorship program in summer, and that will be ending towards the end. I think it's the August 31st date. But our plan is to continue, again, the Faculty Mentors Program to provide support to faculty through the fall semester. Next slide. One other area that, that we also strengthening is the student resource. Just like the faculty piece, we ask students to quickly get involved in this online experience in spring, but we didn't really have a lot of opportunity to prepare them to be effective learners. But we did beef up that work and continue that process for summer. And our goal is also to continue providing professional development opportunity for students, what we call student resources for effective learning in a virtual environment. And there are 4 of these key resources. I will be sending out next week a quick memo to all of our students, both incoming new students as well as continuing students, about these resources. And we ask that they take advantage of this to be able to engage their classes effectively. The first one is the orientation course, which is titled, Are You Ready? Are You Ready? And it provides not only exposure to how to learn online, but also how to get used to the Blackboard environment. So this is a very, very quick 1-hour workshop that we're encouraging our students to be enrolled in. And once they complete this, they get a certificate, which we're asking them to show their faculty members. And if, again, this is something that I'm reaching out to faculty and encouraging you to have students submit this certificate as proof of completion. And if they haven't done it, to encourage them to do so within the first week of class so that at least they have the ability to engage much more effectively in an online space. The additional resources we have for them on the next slide. And that includes the How to Succeed Online. This is an additional tool about Blackboard. There is this frequently asked questions for remote learning that we have for students. And there is this distance learning resource. This is a very good one as well, that was developed at the central office through work done by Macaulay Honors College and the Graduate Center. This one actually sent to all CUNY students, and I would be sharing this with our students as well in the memo that I sent to them. I also will be sending a memo also next week to our faculty in terms of the professional development that I just discussed. The Associate Provost did send a memo last week, but we will be following up with just a reminders to faculty as well. There are additional resources. We have next slide for students, additional student support. The library, I've been asked questions about the library, what will happen in that space. The library will not be open, but we will have limited staffing. I had discussions with the chief librarian earlier this week, and so the library will be open in terms of limited staffing, but it won't be open to students. And that limited staffing will just be available to provide services on select days and hours with supervision. The details of those are still being worked out with VP Rotolo. The library also has reached out, and this is really excellent work they have done in this regard, reaching out to our department chairs and the faculty to identify open educational resources and other electronic materials that could actually be used in place of print, text, books, or other print materials for the virtual space. And what I would like to do is to encourage faculty to respond to that email that went out to faculty. The earlier the library gets those requests, the earlier they will be able to provide quick support to faculty and departments before the semester begins. So as quickly as they can, this will be very, very helpful in accelerating this important part of our work of returning to campus. We have actually been moving towards and thanks to the president and others who have worked on this, the idea of a basic needs center came actually from the task force the president established with regard to hunger and homelessness last semester. And that task force recommended that we establish a basic needs center. That work then was taken up by Dean Basil and Vice President Susan Ebersol. And we were working about having a physical space. And then the virus came in. And that physical space was to be at the old gymnasium. There's been work and discussions going on also with facilities. But rather than just wait to have a physical space, we decided why not have this virtually? And that's what this will be. There'll be a formal launch of this next semester. But what that center will do is simply pull together all of the services being done by the Office of Campus Life, the food pantry, micro grants, counseling services, all into this one space so that it's much more accessible to our students. There is some money we've received recently from the New York City Food Bank, nearly $18,000, thanks to them, to support the work at the food pantry. That has been really, really helpful with regard to our students. And then some micro grants that we also have in place, again, through donations from external support that it's in place that we've used on the last semester and summer to help students. We plan to continue to provide that additional support this coming fall. And then there's also the counseling services, working with faculty in the Department of Social Work. They will be able to provide some additional support on areas related to mental health issues and so on for our students. On the grant piece, I know there's been some discussions around that. The president mentioned the CARES Act. We did receive a little over $400,000 in CARES Act that we have put together a plan, a two-tiered approach that allows us to provide a large percentage of that money to support our students in terms of books and expenses. But the students who will be receiving that support are students who are Title IV eligible. And that's really a requirement of that. And we have submitted the plan to CUNY already in terms of this. But there's also the second component of the plan itself. The remainder of those funds will go to select students who have applied or who will be applying to help them out with their utility bills and offset housing and the medical bills as well. And so I want to thank Student Affairs and Enrollment Management for putting together this particular plan that would help over 2,000 of our students. The final slide that I want to just comment on is one about international students. There's been questions about that as well. And by the way, I want on the student support, we are not leaving out students who are not Title IV eligible. We will continue to use donations we have received from foundations such as the Petrie Foundation to support those students as best as we can, and that would include international students, DACA, and undocumented students, similar to what we did this past semester and this summer as well. The international students piece, everyone is probably aware of the guidelines that we received about not allowing students to come in if they're not going to be taking in-person classes. That particular decision by the administration was reversed And then this past weekend, we got another clarification to that requirement. And what it does say is that reverting to March 2020 guidelines has now been clarified to mean that while continuing international students are allowed to take only online courses next semester, this flexibility is not extended to new students. So if there is a new student coming in, they will not have the opportunity to do so. However, if the international students are already in the country, they're transferring from institutions around the country or any of our community colleges, those students are allowed to take online and or hybrid courses for fall 2020. We have a few of our students that we are already advising through Teresita's office, and they have done a great job in advising our students, including those who are unable to travel to the country, if there are incoming new students, to register for one fully online course of study from their home countries so that they can continue to make progress. As everyone knows, travel restriction is pretty high at this point. A number of countries have closed their borders, others have banned travels, and so once those borders are reopened and travel bans are lifted, then we will work with those students that have been accepted to secure a visa for them to come join us in spring. So there's a lot of moving parts in terms of the academic side of the planning of phase 2 that will be part of what we will be submitting to CUNY next week in preparation for our fall return to fall reopening. Thank you again, Mr. President, and Rene, for the excellent work your group has done to work with us to get to where we are.
Thank you, Provost Nwosu and Vice President Rotolo. You're pretty clear from these presentations the amount of work that has gone into these plans for phase 1 and phase 2 at the college, and on the part of many. Thank you to those on the task force, 2 task forces that have worked on this, but also to the many others that are contributing. One thing I wanted to just add a little detail in terms of one aspect of what the Provost just covered, and that is the laptop loaner program. There were close to 700 laptops and iPads that were distributed in the spring term to mostly to students. So far in the fall, we've had 160 requests for loaner laptops, and we expect that that will increase further. The SEEK program is also distributing laptops to SEEK students. We've received 750 Chromebooks and 850 iPads from CUNY Central Office. So we feel that we are very well prepared to take care of students who need those for the upcoming fall term. And I think our real concern is that students are aware and will apply to have those loaners so that we can get them to them so they're really ready to start the term. We also have about 200 staff and faculty have received computers to help with working online. And we are still receiving computers that were part of the faculty computer upgrade program that will be distributed. And finally, there were, I mentioned earlier, I think in the last briefing, that the university is negotiating new licensing agreements with Zoom and Camtasia and Labster and a few other companies that are providing us with the software tools that have been really critical for doing our distance learning. And those negotiations are nearly completed from what I understand. So we expect that there's going to be broad Zoom availability for faculty members in the fall, and hopefully that will be probably much bigger availability, greater availability than we had in the spring from what I understand. But these other tools are important too. Camtasia is a great tool for developing online material. that's asynchronously delivered, and Labster, of course, for the lab fields is a great tool. So, and then there are students who, although what we've found through surveys with students who are applying for loaner laptops, we've found that most students do have access to Wi-Fi. There are some who don't. So for those few students who don't, we are trying to provide them with a Wi-Fi hotspot so that they can have access. Obviously, students have to have some kind of access in order to be able to fully participate in the courses that are coming up for the fall. So what I would like to do now is turn to some of the questions that have come in. And the first question I'll ask you, Vice President Rotolo, to respond to. It's around who's doing the health screening at the gates as faculty and staff and students come in, and kind of how you see that developing now as we move forward.
Actually, we're not doing the screening at the gates. We're doing pre-screening, which is the protocol that was put in place by both New York State and by CUNY. So I had sent out a memo maybe a week or so ago, and I will send it out again. And also Vice President Ewing Morgan has also gotten information out to the community with the form and the link to the form. We are asking people to pre-screen at home. We don't want you coming to campus if you answer yes to any of the questions. You must answer no to all of the questions. There's an automatic process for the screening form to go to the actual screener who's been trained through a training video that was provided by CUNY and New York State on responding to that. And because we don't actually have a clear way right now, and we're talking through that, for officers at the gate to know somebody has pre-screened, we're asking people to bring a copy of the form to the gate, just so we know that you've pre-screened and you've answered no to all the questions. That is the process. So it is not officers at the gate that are screening people. We are asking everyone in the community to pre-screen and only come to campus if your answers are no.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, there was another question that came in around that area about, are there hand sanitizers? And I know, Vice President Rotolo, from what you have said in the past, that we have hand sanitizer stations distributed broadly everywhere where we're going to have people.
Yes.
So all those precautions that we need to take to keep people safe on campus have really, including signage, including all of the spacing that is required, and you know, just to reiterate what we are doing, you know, the standard guideline, we've heard it for months now, is 6 feet. And of course, 6 feet is kind of a meaningless number. It's helpful in a general way, but we know that it's really the concentration of virus in the air that really counts, and that depends on whether you're outdoors, whether you're indoors. If you're indoors, what the ventilation is like. And so what we are doing for all of our spaces where we will have either staff working or students is using 10 feet as a minimum spacing, and also paying attention to what we can do around air handling, because that obviously is really critical along with that. So one of the things that's been asked frequently too is, are we going to be checking temperatures? And the answer to that is no. We will not be doing that. That doesn't really add very much of another layer of security. The pre-screening is really the key thing. And if that is done before anyone comes to campus, that is by far our best screening procedure. Once somebody shows up at the gate, they're already in a position, if they were infectious, to expose somebody, getting their temperature checked. So we will not be reliable. We don't really feel that adds any layer of protection, or if it does at all, it's very minimal. So what,
Can I just add to that, President
please do,
Lemons, that,
please do.
yeah, and I didn't, you know, I could have had a much longer presentation, but I wanted to leave more time for people to ask their questions. But we intend on only opening 3 gates. We will have those 3 gates to the campus manned at all times. Everyone will need to check in. Everyone will have to have a scheduled appointment to come on campus. We are not going to be having an open campus through this situation until things change dramatically. So we'll have gate 8, gate 5, and gate 13 open. They will be manned. We are in the process of ordering and installing touchless card readers so that we will have people come on and run their ID through it so we know that they actually came on campus. We'll have a record of it. In addition to it being pre-scheduled in advance, we're really following a lot of the procedures we've been following for the last few months and few months. So everything will be scheduled in advance.
Thank you. That's a really important clarification. And just, you know, the big picture here, we've known for a long time, and the basis of all of our planning around this is that the most important step for keeping everybody safe and healthy is to reduce exposure of individuals, because it is extremely hard, as we all know, to know yourself if you might be infectious. If you're asymptomatic and you don't know you've been in contact with someone who is infectious, you simply have no way of knowing. And so the best first line of safety is to reduce the presence on campus. And that's been our guiding principle from the beginning. And it's going to remain that. I think what you all have to do is think back to around March 5th. And March 5th, we were just a little behind, only a few days behind having the rate of infections that we have now in New York State. And we have every potential right now to climb right back up that same infection curve and hospitalization curve that we did subsequent to that date. So there's really only one thing that is different, and that is we've experienced that. We've looked at other states that haven't been careful, and we know that there are measures that we can take to not have that happen. And those measures are to keep our contact down, and if we are going to have people on campus and students on campus, to take all those precautions. And that really ultimately depends on not just our having posters around that tell everyone what to do. They have really to do with everyone actually following what's on those and what those guidelines are. I'm pretty confident that's what we will see at Lehman College, but it is really important, I think, to keep reminding ourselves that that's what we need to do. And one of the things that's in our guidelines that we will be submitting is that masks will be mandatory at all times. The only time a mask would not be mandatory is if you're in an office by yourself and there's no possible way that you're going to have contact. But if you're in a room with somebody else or walking around the campus, masks are absolutely required. There's really no give on that. There's no tolerance on that. The only exception to that will be for someone who has a health reason why they could not do that. But I think that probably narrows it down to very few individuals, because those individuals probably also ought to be very careful about being on campus at all. So that I think we can't emphasize enough. And today you probably noticed now Dr. Fauci is starting to talk about goggles. So I expect that you can't get them on Amazon after today. But anyway, that probably is something that we're going to be hearing more about. But certainly, we're going to stick to masks. I want to just check and see if there are any other questions that have come in that in another area that we haven't addressed. Yeah, there are a few. One of the questions is, and I don't know, Provost, if you'll have this information or if this is something that we need to to find out what's happening with the community band and chorus. What I can say, well, I guess because it's community, I can maybe address that, and Vice President Rotolo can address that. It's not really our academic, our Lehman chorus. All of our community events will not be happening, and I think it's very unlikely. We may be surprised. I think it's very unlikely that we will have any of those through the spring of 21. There's just no way that we're going to be in a position where we have an immunized population by the end of the spring, despite all the optimistic statements, and hopefully they're right, that we'll have a vaccine, but it's not going to be distributed and effective for us. So we will not be having community events, including those on campus, really through the academic year. And if I'm wrong about that, we'll all be thrilled. And I don't know, Provost, if you want to say anything more about, and you've already talked about the kinds of student activities that we will have on campus, courses. If you want to say anything more about what might happen around student performance that ordinarily we would be looking forward to.
All of those will actually happen virtually, and there's several that are being planned. I had discussions with this afternoon, earlier today, with Dean of Arts and Humanities. There are lots of those events that will be taking place that are being planned with our music department in particular, with our theater department in particular, but those will actually be happening virtually. There will be a series of guest speakers that have been planned as well. And those are excellent guest speakers they've lined up that will be featured across campus. But again, they would be done virtually. Across and within student affairs, all of the leadership programs that have been planned for students will also be happening virtually. And we will be providing information on a detailed plan. We have a plan, but we'll be sharing that information with the campus community. But all of this will be done virtually.
Thank you. One of the specifics that came up, and this is not something I've been aware of, and Provost, you may have been aware, about, it has to do with financial aid. And students seem to be having a lot of trouble getting through to get questions answered around TAP. So that's the New York State, obviously. Are there, we may not have an answer for that in this session, but that is, that sounds like a major concern.
I don't have an answer for that at this point, unless Rene, you have any comment on that, but we can provide some.
I don't.
Okay, so but we will definitely, that's something we will respond to, we'll find out about. That's really critical. One of the really challenging aspects of working online and providing student services is around services like financial aid, so critical for students to be able to enroll. So we will definitely check into that.
There was, Mr. President, some question around Zoom as a tool for instruction, and I know that in one of our past briefings, we had indicated that it's initially we didn't support its use, but I think the problems with Zoom has been fixed, and yes, that's a tool that can be used for instruction.
Yeah, I think we've all become perhaps not addicted, but definitely reliant on Zoom. So I was actually just thinking this morning, kind of back to when we can physically be back on campus, and it's getting harder and harder even to imagine that, right? It's sort of like this sense of, will that really happen? Of course it will happen. But then I was thinking about the situations that we get in at times when someone can't attend a meeting, and Yeah, occasionally we would use Zoom to bring that person in, but I have a feeling we're going to be much more, we're much more likely to loop in people by Zoom for meetings, maybe even department meetings. And I think it's probably one of those ways that our approach to things will be changed.
Correct. And there have been some questions folks have asked around, would we require staff? I think Rene's point about what we've done in the past over the last several months would be the same approach we will utilize as we return to fall. And so nothing really has changed in that regard. And I did respond also to a similar question from one of our deans about a staff meeting, faculty meeting, including FPMB and other meetings we have on campus. Those will continue, including PDC, virtually, at least for now.
One of the aspects that gets reported on in the PMP process that I mentioned earlier is around internships. And we have a question about that, whether we will be able to have internships for students in the fall. Do you have any thoughts on that, Provost?
Again, it depends on the safety. One of the things that's happened, because we've seen some improvement in terms of the health, the pandemic situation in New York. At the beginning, I did mention that a number of our clinical placements and field work placements will be happening off campus. It's now because we're able to. Initially, we were not able to do so in spring, and so to the extent that there is an agency or an entity that is going to support our students with regard to that, and it's safe, then we will handle that on a case-by-case basis, and the department will make that recommendation. So that's just the approach we're taking with internships as well.
Great, thank you. So we are really coming to the end of this session, and I want again to thank Provost Nwosu and Vice President Rotolo for being willing again to give their time to be here. I think their input obviously has been so important for us on these critical things that are coming up or that we're in the middle of. So I've got a few things I'd like to say before we close. One, I wanted to mention, kind of reiterate, I guess, how thankful we are for the individuals, including faculty and staff, who contributed to the campaign for Lehman and have helped to support students with that support through the food bank, for emergency grants, and also for those foundations like Petrie and Robin Hood. Robin Hood specifically gave $150,000 for those students that were not Title IV eligible. So we're very appreciative of that, and those efforts are continuing. We're continuing to raise funds, and as was mentioned previously, I think 2 weeks ago, we have now raised the goal for the campaign for Lehman from 1 million to 1.5 million, and we're continuing to work on that. And I'd like to just to end with, again, coming back to Representative John Lewis and the piece that he wrote. The way he ended his op-ed, his posthumous op-ed in the New York Times that was published today, I think is a good way for us to end this session. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence, is the more excellent way. Now it's your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. Thank you all for coming, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you.